Hello, Manchester Hooksett, Auburn. This is the Progress Report. It's every Wednesday right here on Channel 23, MCTV. And we are getting through the month of January. You know, Mike, I've noticed how the older you get, the more time speeds up.
Yes, I have a theory about that.
You do?
I do.
Oh.
Yeah, my theory is that it just only seems to speed up.
And it doesn't apply in January. January still seems to be a long
time. You know, the best thing about January is the January thaw, and I don't know when we're going to get that.
Well, we had one.
We already had it or not.
Had it.
But I'm hoping we get another one because
I'm sure we're going to get another one. We
tipped over on the ice on my way over here today.
So in any event, folks, we have a terrific program lined up for today because we have our favorite guest on, our Secretary of State for many, many years. We'll talk about that. Bill Gardner is with us. But we have this wonderful new feature created by my good friend Mike Farley.
It's not new anymore. It's over a year old now.
That's right. It's a year.
Just about the anniversary of it.
So we have the POTUS report on the Progress Report.
Well, we'll start with that. But before I do that, I have to get a message out to Mayor Craig. I know it's only been a few weeks you've been in office, but we got to get these roads fixed. We're getting clobbered out here. So I'll just leave it at that. I know they're trying, but oh my goodness, the weather is wreaking havoc with the roads. So on to the POTUS report and the Progress Report. And this week I'm going to apologize in advance. It is a little bit snarky, but it's pretty quick. We know that the president is going to be attending the Davos World Economic Summit, which is not something that all presidents attend, but this president apparently has never been able to wrangle an invitation in the past and wanted one, but since he's the president now, I think he's only maybe the second
president to go, right?
I would dispute that. I think there's been more than two, but the last one to go was Bill Clinton. It's been a while since a president has attended. I think Ron Reagan attended by video, but this is not like a economic summit of nations. This is a bunch of rich guys basically getting together to decide how they're going to divide up the world on us. But he'll be attending, and I wanted to focus on the people he's bringing with him. The list is very, very long. He's going to be bringing, Chief of Staff John Kelly is no longer going to be going, but National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster, Director of the National Economic Council Gary Cohn. He will also be bringing Rex Tillerson, Secretary of State, Secretary of Commerce Wilbur Ross, Secretary of Labor Alex Acosta, Secretary of Transportation Elaine Chao, Secretary of Energy, the most ironic secretary of them all, Rick Perry, Secretary of Homeland Security Kirsten Silent J. Nielsen, U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer, Assistant to the President for Homeland Security and Counterterrorism Thomas Bossert, USAID Administrator Mark Green, Commissioner of the FDA Scott Gottlieb, just to name a few. It's an enormous contingent, extraordinary in its number, but I'm here to report a recent scratch from the list, and that is Melania Trump. First Lady Melania Trump was going to go, and she is not going to go, and I've heard it speculated that the reason for that may be related to this new issue of hush money being paid out of the campaign to a porn star for events that never happened. And that's the POTUS report for this week.
That's a good one, Mike. It's really good.
I told you it would be snarky. Sometimes I just rise to the bait. I'm sorry.
You know, on Saturday they had the rally for the women's march on the women.
Yes, which you attended.
Which I attended.
I'm proud to report.
My favorite sign is, without immigration, Trump would have no wives. However, that's
snarky too.
That's pretty snarky.
You know, that's pretty snarky too. Let's get serious.
We're going to get serious. We have a wonderful guest with us tonight. He's one of our favorite people to have on the Progress Report. Our Secretary of State, serving his 21st term. Is that really possible, Bill? 21 terms. That's 42 years. My goodness. Think of all that's gone under the the bridge.
That's a 2-year. That's a 2-year term. You have to get reelected by the legislature at the beginning of every session.
I remember you when I first started, not in the legislature, but carrying your sign.
Pretty troublemaker, even though I did it. I mean, and I can tell you, folks, if you come up and visit the State House, and I urge everybody to do that, stop into the Secretary of State's office. If Bill is there, he will be graceful, he will greet you, and if you got any question about who won the 1968 presidential primary and what happened that was unusual, he will tell you.
Or who came in second?
Or came in second. He knows the
knows.
history. Unbelievable. His memory and his...
Because he was there, Bob.
he was there. But not only was he there, but his memory is as sharp as it could ever be. And you can talk about Pat Buchanan winning the New Hampshire primary. Do you go back to when Henry Cabot Lodge won the damn thing on a write-in vote? You don't go back that far.
I don't go back that far.
I do, because I was campaigning in New Hampshire at the time for Nelson Rockefeller as the Liberal. I mean, here is a treasure of New Hampshire with his fount of knowledge, not only about our history, but protecting our presidential primary, protecting the integrity of our voting system in New Hampshire. And if you love politics, you should come to New Hampshire, folks. You should come to New Hampshire. Because I think Bill wrote a book about this. New Hampshire has more elections, probably than any other state.
Yep.
Everybody gets elected every 2 years except our U.S. senators, who by the U.S. Constitution get to serve 6-year terms. But everybody else gets elected. And the elections are fair, and they're honest, and we can trust in the results. And that's been true for a long time, and it's been in the care and custody of Mr. Bill Gardner of Manchester, who has defended our primary and defended the integrity of our election system ever since. And when we get to elect him, it's one of the few things we do in the first meeting of the legislature when we have a new term. We're in the second year of the term. The new term will start January of next year. And we have to elect the state treasurer, the sergeant at arms, and the secretary of state. Bill Gardner, from Manchester, although he is an acknowledged Democrat, has been elected 21 times to serve as our Secretary of State by acclamation.
And usually with there's a challenger. Every now and then there's a challenger comes
Well,
up.
there's been a few challenges, but we never have to go to a vote. We just elect Bill Gardner, and that's a remarkable achievement. Now, there's a little skunk in the lawn party here, and I want to talk to Bill about that. Back in July, President Trump announced the creation of a Presidential Advisory Commission on Electoral Integrity. And this was going to be chaired by the Vice President, Michael Pence from Indiana, and I guess co-chaired, is that the right word, by Chris?
Vice chair.
Vice Chair, Chris Kobach, the Secretary of State in Kansas, who among some of us has the reputation of the #1 vote suppressor in the nation, that he's using the concern about electoral fraud and people not voting who should. And a lot of people were very upset that
Bob, I want to jump in there because it's important to understand that although the Vice President of the United States was technically the chairman of this committee, if this committee was going to do any work, it's certainly the Vice President wasn't going to be involved in the day-to-day
Right,
affairs.
right. He's got a lot
It
of
was
other
the Vice Chair who was actually going to be running the committee's activities. Bill, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that, practically speaking, is
I think
how it would have worked had it
mean, we only
had a
had
little
two-
more legs. I know.
we've only had 2 meetings, and the first meeting, the Vice President was there and ran most of that meeting. In the second meeting, he was not. So
and that was the meeting right here,
That's
Here.
Manchester, Goffstown, St. Anselm College, and it was the only 2 meetings, and the second one was right here.
And the before the first meeting, we had a conference call. It was the first time that we all could talk together. And at that conference call, the Vice President, right at very close to the beginning of it, said that he wanted this commission to attempt to work together, to find common ground, to let the facts speak for themselves, not to have preconceived ideas of what the facts were going to show us, and that there would be spirited debates. He expected that, and then in the end, hopefully, the commission could come together on a report. Those were almost exactly his words. Most of them were exactly his words. And then he said almost the exact same thing at the beginning of the first meeting in person. Now, that was a conference call. We were all on that call. And then the first meeting was in Washington in July. And he said basically the same thing, that there'd be a lot of discussion, there will be disagreements, there will be strong debate, but let's try to get the facts and then reach some consensus based on the facts. So when I first heard that from him and the others, because it was a conference call, so we didn't talk afterwards, but when we had that first meeting, I mean, that's what we thought was going to actually happen. And anyway, it was a rough road,
Well,
to say the least.
Bill, I'm going to play devil's advocate here a little bit, although I'm a big Bill Gardner fan. I hope you know that. Here we are with a president who started out his inauguration claiming that he had the biggest inaugural crowd in the history in D.C., and the picture showed that that was nowhere near true. Barack Obama had far more people there, who said that he would have won the election if there had not been massive voter fraud in many places, including New Hampshire. And a lot of people saying, why would you lend your very considerable reputation, which remains very high with me, why would you lend your name to this effort given who was sponsoring this? I mean, you've spoken to this, but I mean, that's what I think people want to know. Why did you think that this could be a legitimate inquiry given the source of the sponsorship?
Well, I wanted to believe that it would be, and I wanted to believe that it was truly a fact-finding effort, and that everything was going to be open, public. People would see everything that we were able to see, and then people could judge what decisions were made.
What did
I know that what the president said about New Hampshire, there's no reason why anyone would really think that based on facts that are available. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't be willing to reach the facts and get the facts and show the people the facts. Because think about this. I did this sort of representing New Hampshire, part of New Hampshire. I mean, I was born here. I live here. I don't like reading in the paper that 3,000 people could have voted that should not have voted. But the facts should speak for themselves. And if we could get the facts, I believed that they would disprove that. But I didn't know that for sure, but I had no reason not to believe that were not 3,000.
Yeah.
So that did hurt the commission, and it was unfortunate that was said, and that led to the onslaught of the negative press. But I believed at the beginning. And first of all, I've worked with 5 of those members over the years, either on committees with them. I've worked with them. So I've seen them in action. I've watched them. And I've had conversations with all of them. I believe that there could have been a 5-4 vote in the direction of in another way, because there were enough people that I believe would let the facts speak for themselves. I heard many of them say that. Let's get this information. But what happened, and this is the major part of this, at that conference call, first of all, we couldn't discuss substantive things during the conference call. But at one point, it was brought up, if we're going to ask for information from the states, how are we going to do it, and what are we going to ask for? And the only thing that we talked about, and there was a consensus, everybody agreed to this, we were going to only ask for what is publicly available to everyone in each of the states. Now, some states have different things that are publicly available than others. And we had a discussion about that because I mentioned that in New Hampshire, the only public information related to the record of the election itself is the checklist that was used at the polling place that has the name of the voter, the address of the voter, the party affiliation, if a voter so chooses to have a party, and whether the person voted or not, and if the person did vote, whether it was by absentee or on election day.
Yeah.
That's it.
And we've seen
That's-
those forms. Those are the ones that the poll workers
But they
strike through with the pencil. It's, I
you
mean,
stand there,
very
you give your
mechanical.
name, they check it off.
Yep.
That is a public document. That kind of document has been a public record in this state going back to 1680, because the very first royal governor of New Hampshire, when New Hampshire was named in December of 1679, and we were no longer part of the Dominion of New England, headed in Boston, this first royal governor, John Cutt, who Fast Day, remember Fast Day? You
I
can remember-
lament the loss of
It's-
Fast
it's-
Day.
Well,
I
Fast
used
Day
to
was
love that
because of
holiday.
John Cutt.
Yep.
The first thing John Cutt had to do in January of 1680 was to have an election for the assembly. It was the only position that people who lived here then could actually vote for. And what did he do? The first thing he did was he asked the 4 towns, we only had 4 towns, Portsmouth, Dover, Exeter, and Hampton. And he said, you 4 towns have to compile a list of the people who are eligible to vote. And we know it was pretty difficult to be able to vote then. But you have to compile a list and make that list public. And that has been the case ever since. That list is public because we're not Venezuela where there's 1.5 million votes that nobody understands where they came from, the voting machine.
So we can check the numbers against the list every time.
We can verify, and any person can verify. So if President Trump wanted to come to New Hampshire and say, go to the archives and say, I would like to see the record of the vote in every single voting place in New Hampshire, he would have the right, under the right, just like any person would, under the right to know law, to get that information. And the right to know law isn't for just people you like. It's for everyone. And it's why we have sustained ourselves as the longest existing democratic free society on earth. Because it is there. It's not hidden. I mean, democracy dies when people lose faith in the election process.
And that's a topic that we want to get to because I know you've got some polling dealing
And
with.
we got some
with
great
that.
stuff on that, but we are all up against our first break.
But even on the other side, I do want to come back. I have a couple questions about the information that was requested and released because when all that was happening, I know that my blood pressure rose several points, and I'd just like to talk about that with you a little bit. But we take a quick break, regroup, and be back in 30
call
seconds.
in 640-3091. We would love to have some participation from our viewers out there. We know you're out there, so call in.
It's a
We'll
great
be right back.
opportunity. Yeah, that's the thing that really.
Hi, folks. This is the progress report for this Wednesday, January 24th. And we are very pleased to have with us our long-serving and very distinguished Secretary of State, Bill Gardner, and I believe we have a call.
We do. Let's take that call.
Hello, Cammie.
Good evening. You're on the progress report.
Hi, I'm on the phone.
You are live on the air. You got a question or a comment?
Yeah.
Let's have it.
Well, I just have. My question is: it seems like Mr. Gardner's trying to be like just transparent for the state, authentically transparent. So I don't get.
Oh, you know what's happening? You're listening to your TV, aren't you? And there's a delay, so it's best if you turn your TV down.
Just turn the TV down to silent. You can talk to us.
I'll turn it down.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
It's not the first time it happened, so that's okay.
Okay. So it just seems like Mr. Gardner is trying to be authentically transparent, and I don't know why that's such a bad thing. Why is everybody questioning that? I'm an independent, and I just think he's trying to do the right thing, and he's sort of kind of been put in a difficult position for that, and I don't really get that.
Well, that's what we're trying to explore.
We're trying to explore that, and we appreciate your call, and I'm sure Secretary Gardner does too.
Absolutely.
Good. Bravo for him.
Thanks for watching. Thanks for the call. And we are going to get into that.
Okay.
So,
And I wanted to follow up on something you said, because as I mentioned, I think that there was some confusion, because I remember at the time that we were reading about this request that was going out for information that I was shocked to find might be on my voter roll form, and including date of birth, last four digits of social. I've worked in the polls. I've been a selectman in Manchester, and I had never seen that information. So I was it was concerning to me that everything seemed to be lumped into one basket. And I know what a defender of New Hampshire elections you are, and you seem so willing to agree to this. Now, since that time, even before you're coming in here today, I've learned a lot. We've seen how the commission operated, and we've had there've been interviews with you, so I understand a heck of a lot better now, as this caller is describing what you were trying to do. But I have to tell you, there was a lot of confusion in that initial startup of this committee, at least on my part, and I think it was shared by others, that made people very defensive of their information, and I don't think that was a good foot for this commission to get off on.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Totally. And at that first conference call, I actually said to the group, first impression is so important, and whatever we do, requesting this information, we have to make sure that it's clear that this is only public information. And in the letter that was sent to the states, it did say that twice in the letter. But I'll tell you how it was frustrating for me, because the end of June, the Civil Liberties Union person sent an email on the Friday. 4th of July was on a Tuesday. This all happened during that weekend and during the week of the 4th of July. And hundreds and hundreds. In my own family, I had people that expressed even more severe than what you have said about this whole matter, because I am sensitive to people's personal information. I'm sensitive to my own. I think I'm like most people that are like that. But what happened was, we were asked, and there's an email chain that's public, because I've had to release everything, and I wanted to. So at about 4:15 in the afternoon on that Friday, we had the request. What is it that you're going to be sending? So we responded. Then there was a follow-up question, a second follow-up question, and a third follow-up. And the third follow-up question, we said, it is going to be the marked checklist. The marked checklist. That is what will be going to the commission. Now, the marked checklist is that checklist you see a person with a little ruler underlining the
Yeah.
name or crossing the name. That's the marked
Physically
checklist.
present at the election when you checked in.
Everybody sees that, and everyone has the right to see it. And it's local, has to be kept 7 years in every community for any person to see that. That is all that was going to be sent. Unfortunately, they didn't understand what a marked checklist was. Even though it's in writing, it was, and so 6 days later, they filed the lawsuit on the privacy issue that they were protecting people's privacy. And what happened was, when they did that, I could no longer communicate. Attorney General's office said, we've got a lawsuit now, and we thought this would all be resolved in a couple of weeks, and then the commission rescinded it and said, well, and it went on for 6 weeks. So
Yeah.
first impression was horrible for people because people were led to believe that I was going to be releasing what you said, birth dates, and I can't. I mean, that's not legal in New Hampshire to release it. So I can only release.
Eventually, I came to understand that. But as you say, that first impression, I didn't realize it was 6 weeks, but I did. I mean, it seemed like quite a while. I couldn't fathom. It seemed to be so counterintuitive. I had known you. I had known your reputation, and I could not understand what was going on, and I try to be informed. So I certainly I get it why there was just a real negative reaction initially, and then the ACLU files suit, and then of course they show up in court, and everybody realizes there's no problem here.
Right.
I mean, it got dismissed the same day.
And then they announced that there was a settlement in the suit, but there was no settlement. It was just a withdrawal of the suit. But unfortunately, the damage was done, first impression, and
Yeah.
it's
Let's talk to Phil.
Yeah, we
it's
got a
what it
caller.
is.
Hey, Phil. You're on the progress report with us and Bill Gardner. You got something you want to contribute? We'd like to hear it.
Thank you. Hi, Mike. Hi, Bob.
Hi, Phil. How you doing?
Hi.
Secretary Gardner, thank you so much for your service over all these years. My 2 cents, I never really threw myself into the issue to figure out whether it was right, wrong, or indifferent. And I'm not one to be blindly led into anything, as you know, Mike.
Yep.
But
Not only I know that, Phil.
knowing Secretary Gardner's track record and having a cursory knowledge of everything that was going on, I said, you know what? He's probably right. And I did a little bit more research and said, of course he's right. And then when you stack that against the party hacks, and I'm not going to use any names, but and I really did think it was an affront to his service and to all that he's done and accomplished, and behind the scenes and quietly and not seeking the limelight and working with everybody and really what we need to move forward, whether it's locally, statewide, or nationally. And he puts his reputation on the line for no personal benefit, and still the people that are supposed to be helping the little guy attack him. I was like, really?
So,
And it just reinforced my distaste for those that are supposedly in the know. They really aren't looking out for everybody. So the reason I called, and Mike, I put you in the same category, and Bob, obviously with the Seabrook Clamshell Alliance, when I was a young kid watching that, loving it.
long time ago.
Yeah, but at times, you guys put your personal benefit aside and do what's right. And I think the three
Well, thank
people
you.
on the panel tonight illustrate that. And the fact that Secretary Gardner has done it with his title, which, he doesn't throw around, really, really means a lot. And I think he's an example, especially for young people. And as you know, I teach school. He would be one person in the political realm that I would say, here's a guy you want to look at, study, and follow not only his knowledge but his demeanor. So that's why I called, and thank you so much for doing it. And I
Well-
thank the Progress Report, because without your show, I wouldn't have had a chance unless I wrote a letter, which is a lost art, to thank him for that service.
Well, thank you very
Thanks
much,
for calling
Phil.
in,
That is a very nice call. I'm sure Secretary
welcome.
Gardner appreciates it for his many years of service to the state.
We appreciate it too, Phil.
So-
Every now and then we get it right, Bob. and
But I'm
glad
gonna
you-
be a little bit of a maybe a little bit of a challenge here. I know you had a very defensible position on the disclosure of information, that you were ready to protect the information that they were asking for from New Hampshire voters that was not public, and there was a lot that was public that you said, why not? I mean, if it's public, it's public. But we know there was another good Democratic Secretary of State on this commission. That was Mr. Dunlap from Maine. And he ended up suing the commission over some of these issues. Did you support him in that? Or, I guess my bigger question is, you were trying to do the right thing to defend the integrity of our elections here in New Hampshire. That the Trump claim that he would have won if it hadn't been for massive voter fraud here in New Hampshire was a canard. We know you were trying to do that. But given you were working on a commission instigated by Trump and his vice president, and your fellow Democratic Secretary of State from Maine, Mr. Dunlap, was suing them, did you ever have any question about participating?
First of all, Matt Dunlap has been a good friend of mine for many years. We both had served as president of the National Association of Secretaries of State. He's been to my office. I've been up to see him. I have tremendous respect for him. We were told that we were not to talk about commission matters to each other on this commission. We were told that at the beginning. We were asked not to do that
Why not?
because of I think because of everything that happened at the beginning, that we should have all of our discussions in a public setting, not somewhere else. So
Okay.
Matt and I talked about that that's the way it was going to be. And so when he decided what he was going to do, he had some reason that he believed there was discussion and communication that all commissioners were not getting. I had no basis to believe that. I had no reason to believe that that was happening, nor that it wasn't happening. I just didn't know. There was nothing that I observed that made me think that that was happening. So, but Matt had something. I don't know, because he didn't talk to me about that. So I didn't feel it was appropriate for me, because I had no basis to think that there might be something like that going on. And to this day, maybe a few weeks ago, there's I don't know of anything yet that has been found that that there was something going on separate from us. But there may be. I just don't know.
And we probably won't, because the commission pretty much is finished at this point. It's given up the ghost. And
yeah, I asked Matt Dunlap if he had gotten anything, and this was a few weeks ago, and he said no. So I don't know if that means that he'll never get to know, but he's an outstanding person, and there are some others on that commission. That's why I really believe that we could, through the power of persuasion, really accomplish something. Particularly if the fact-finding was successful.
imprimatur in this thing poisoned the whole well?
Well, I agree that happened, that he did that by saying what he said, and that led to this onslaught of criticism. But if everything was done in public, which is what the hope was, and what was said at the very beginning was going to be the case, if that was all done, there is a need
There was potential to-
for a commission, because at the beginning, when I was looking at this, and I was thinking, the people that are not going to do it, Matt did not do it because of their database. Their database had some material that was public, which was the year of birth. We don't have that. But we weren't using the database. We were using the paper documents.
And that's another issue. There was a time you actually had to round these up from the individual towns and then process them, digitize them, so that they could be
And
transferred.
by law, every town and city has to send the original used copy of that checklist to the state archives within 90 days after an election. And so we have those records going back to 1904 on microfilm, but we scan them. We scan them when we get them. And
Oh, okay, so that work was
and
pretty much
it was
done.
already, it was 90-some% complete already, because people come in over the years and have asked for that information. And that's the verified record. I mean, when I said earlier, democracy dies when people lose faith in the election process, that's the most important part of all of this. That's what a democracy is. That's a republic. We get to choose those who are going to be our leaders. And if people lose faith in that process, it goes away. That's how they die. That's how democracies die. And so if you have a president saying, in particular for New Hampshire, I was on this commission for New Hampshire. I didn't ask to be on it. I didn't ask anyone to put in a good word in for me. I had no part of any of that. And when I was asked, and I got a call from a person in the vice president's office, I thought about it a little bit, but anyway, I thought that I really had an obligation to do it. And think about, if someone says that there's something wrong with your process, and then you're not willing to show what is the proof of whether it's right or wrong, you're not willing to do that, that person gets a bigger stage. That person's microphone is much louder, because that person can just say, see, then they're not even willing to show what is public information. So it would have been terrible position for New Hampshire, because we were the one state that was singled out individually. And if we said, nope, we couldn't. I couldn't follow the law and deny a person what was a right to know request, because this is a public record of the most fundamental.
And you make a good point. Even had you not served on the commission, you would have
Exactly.
received the request.
Exactly.
You would have had to comply with it, because you comply when anyone asks for that
Yes.
particular type of record.
And people called me
And-
about that and asked me that same question. They said, well, I want it. I said, "Yeah, absolutely. This is, our right to know isn't only for New Hampshire people. It's
Yep.
for anyone who wants to come in and look at it."
Well, I always learn something on the progress report. That's a point that I hadn't considered, that that part of the issue, the part that really got my blood boiling, would have happened anyway. And the good news is that at least you were there to keep an eye on things when it did happen. So, I'll be the first to admit that I believe my initial impression turned out to
Well,
have been wrong.
At the first meeting, Matt Dunlap was the one that said, "I'd rather be at the table than on the table.
It's a very good point. That's a good one.
I guess it's time for our next break, folks.
Yeah, I hope when we come back, we can talk about the generality of the public integrity of our
I think we
elections
want to
and that
move
kind of
on
thing.
from this because we've had a good discussion of this, and we had a caller that's apparently not with us. But if you want to call back, we'll get you right after we come back from the break. We're very pleased to have Bill Gardner be our guest on this edition of the Progress Report for Wednesday, January 24th. We'll be right back. Hey, this is the Progress Report, and we're having a very good one tonight, I think, if I may say so, because we have as our guest New Hampshire's long-serving Secretary of State, the Dean of Secretaries of State, the guardian of our presidential primary, the protector of our election systems in New Hampshire, which are honest and fair and well accounted for. And he's been talking about his role as a participant, one of the commissioners on the Presidential Advisory Commission on Electoral Integrity, which was abruptly terminated by, I guess, a tweet from the president. They had two public hearings, one in D.C. in July, one in New Hampshire, right at our own great St. Anselm College, alma mater for my good friend Mike Farley, in September. And he continues on. Go ahead. Let's take. Do we have our caller? We'll take our caller.
We do. Caller, you're live on the Progress Report. How are you?
Hi.
Okay.
You might want to turn your TV down. There's a delay and it gets confusing.
Okay, all righty. I'll do that.
It'll make it easier.
Tell us who you are and go right ahead.
There we go.
He continues on.
Okay.
Yep.
Do we have a caller?
We still hear the TV in the background.
Yeah,
though.
this is going to be confusing
Yeah.
if you don't turn that off.
Hi, I'm just calling to say hello to Billy Gardner, as I know him, my
Billy.
boy. And I didn't see the very beginning. I turned the station when Phil Sapienza was on, so I didn't hear the whole thing. But I just wanted to say hello. And there's no one as true blue as Bill Gardner, and he can be a very, very honest person. So I've known him since I was young. His father worked with my grandfather, and he was my paper boy, so that's how I know Billy. So if you figured out who I am yet, Bill, I have to look at your face to see if all of a sudden you can figure that one out.
Okay. Thanks for the call.
Thank you for the call.
One of your neighbors growing up. Okay, we'll see you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much for calling.
Hey, about that. Somebody's known you longer than Lou D'Alessandro. I didn't think there was such a person.
And a finer endorsement could not be had. I don't.
I just want to kind of conclude on this, Bill, and you've been really eloquent about this, as you always are. The whole thing was, demolished just a little while ago by a presidential declaration that because not enough states had sent enough data, there was no point in proceeding. And I know you've spoken to this, but I'd like you to tell our viewers, do you regret what you did? I mean, by agreeing to be on this commission.
Why I agreed?
Yeah. Do you have any regrets about the way this turned out or your participation in it?
Well, I'm certainly disappointed about it because I had hoped that we would accomplish the fact-finding and we would be able to help make people see this issue of confidence in their elections. That this, I gave you that UNH survey that was done in November, almost 1,000 people, there are a lot of people in this country and in this state that have a loss of confidence in the integrity of the election.
Oh, yeah.
And I want to
When
talk
you have a
about
president claiming that the election was fraudulent, but in terms of the popular vote, he's very happy with the Electoral College vote. You know, that's what you get.
he's not the first one that said this. I mentioned before, I've worked at the polls. If I'm not working at the polls, I'm holding a sign or something. I'm at the polls on election day. And we've heard in the past about the busloads of Massachusetts people who come up and somehow know the names and addresses of the people who haven't voted and take their place and commit, what do they call it, voter impersonation, the most inefficient method of voter fraud there is. I've never seen one of those buses. I've never seen a photograph of one. I should think that because when I'm at the polls, right across the way are a bunch of Republicans at the polls as well. I would think they'd snap a photo with their phone showing these people getting off the buses. I've never seen such a thing. And
I've experienced the same thing. I've had individuals personally come into my office and describe the bus that they saw and why they believed it was a bus of people that were voting who shouldn't have been voting. But no one yet has taken a photo of the bus and I ask them to do this. Please do this, because this is how it'll be effective if you're trying to convey that you really believe this is happening. We don't have any proof that there are any buses. We don't have any photographs of it. But if some people say, well, these people just have this perception and it's wrong. But the problem is perception is powerful. And if we just let it fester, if we don't come up with a way to deal with it, and that's what I was hoping this commission would be able to do, that it would be able to get the facts. And I'm going to tell you, I'm doing everything I can that before we have this next filing period in June, we're going to be able to give a report to the people of this state about that issue. Because for the first time, we've been part of this cross-check program. And with
Describe
about
that.
30
What
states
is
are
that?
in this together with us. We also we're able now to do things that the legislature has recently given us, that we're coming much, much closer to be able to put on the table for the people of the state and say, here, this is what we've done. This is exactly what we've done over the last almost half a year now. And you can see for yourself what we have found. And that's, to me, is the most important way to deal with this. And if you just keep fighting about it, one side saying there is, the other side saying there isn't, it's just festering and festering. And Bob, you mentioned that the president is a big part of this, but I've gone back to look at the major polling firms in this country, the three networks, NBC with Wall Street Journal, ABC with the Post, CBS with the New York Times, and others. And when you ask that question and you go back, and this has been the same for almost a decade now. People believe this. So in this New Hampshire poll, 956 randomly selected, more Democrats than Republicans. You see the tabs, 51% female, 49% male. 55% believe voter fraud is a serious issue. Now,
in general.
In New Hampshire.
In the country.
In general.
In
Across
general.
the nation.
In general. Now, of that number, some of them think it's somewhat serious, and some say it's very serious. But 55% say it's serious, either somewhat or major. But in New Hampshire, it's less than that. It's about a third that feel that way
Well, that's a
about
good
New
testament
Hampshire.
to-
But when
to
they
justify
are
it.
asked
But
about
the
the confidence in New Hampshire, the confidence is higher than the country. And we know that because back in 2005, after the Help America Vote Act passed, a number of states went out and bought voting machines, paperless, state of the art, and a lot of people objected to it, said we don't trust it, we don't trust it. And when it reached critical mass, that they had to deal with it. But they could not just throw out these machines because many of the states just spent all their Help America Vote Act money on these machines. So they said, okay, we'll deal with it this way. You don't trust them, we'll give you a paper ballot, but you've got to vote early. That's how early voting began. You've got to vote early, we'll give you a paper
Really?
ballot.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So I happen to see a poll in one of a polling outfit that polled Georgia about the question of how confident the voters were in the voting process, in the integrity of it. And it astounded me. So I asked,
In a negative way? I mean,
yeah, like 40-some% didn't trust.
Wow.
So I asked Andy Smith back then. I said, Andy, would you ask the same question in New Hampshire? And he did. And we were like only 12%. Much, much, much different. So Andy, unbeknown to me, in the summer of 16, asked the same question a second time. And it was the same thing. Now, this was the summer of that presidential election, but people have confidence in the integrity that the way they voted is actually going to be the result. It's going to be counted the way they voted, and that part of the
And a
process,
lot of that comes
they have
from
confidence in that.
the paper ballots, physically
Yeah.
seeing someone strike their name on a piece of paper that you keep up in Concord.
Mike, we're out of time, but I want to give Bill a quick chance to talk about how well we're doing in our voting program with our same-day voter registration and our voter participation. You want to talk about that? Because I think it's one of our really great things.
30 seconds, though, Bill, sorry.
The last two presidential elections, we were over 14 percentage points higher than the country. And
Turnout?
And turnout. And you have to go back over 50 years to see that we were as high as we are now then. You have to go back to 1960, that election. And
That's
for
a
the
really
country,
big
and this is a statistics that you don't read about because people don't want to write about this for some reason. If you take every presidential election and you start the last half of the 20th century, so you go back 1950, start with 52. There were 5 presidential elections in the 50s and 60s when you had 6-month voting residency requirements. You had to pay a poll tax. I had to pay a poll tax before I voted the first time, and you had to be 21 then. And you only had minimal number of days a year that you could actually register. Town clerks, city clerks couldn't register. You had to only be able to do it on 2 days before whenever we had an election. You think about that. In those 5 presidential elections in the 50s and 60s when that was going on, and we know how many people gave their lives demonstrating, fighting, break
seconds.
the
We're getting
barriers
close.
down, and what happened? Every single presidential election in the 50s and 60s was higher than any presidential election since 1972. And 1972 was the first time 18, 19, 20-year-olds had the right to vote. 12 elections since 1972, 12 presidentials. The highest of the 12 is lower than the
Well,
lowest.
Bill, we're going to have to come back. We're going to have to come back
Yep.
because there's more to talk about. This has been fascinating discussion. I've enjoyed hearing the
Goodbye.
callers
I
calling to
can't
support you.
believe
And thanks for coming down and joining us. You're a busy guy. We're really proud of what you do to serve the state of New Hampshire. And Mike and I'll be back next week. It'll be the last day of January, folks. Winter moves on. We'll be back next time with another edition of the Progress Report. Thanks to our viewers. Thanks to those that called in. And thanks to Bill Gardner.